back over what we just discussed. We're out here in West Africa, and I've got a nice little spot here to chat just for a few quick moments. So, we the last videos on the interpretation, and we proved that every movie that you've ever seen in your entire life, no matter how malevolent or benevolent seeming, no matter how benign seeming, any movie that's ever come out of Hollywood has been satanically inspired, has been satanically um, embedded with a subtext, a sub story that will have pagan mythology, which we know is satanic mythology or history, encoded within it, or some other anti messianic message, or some sort of replacement theology associated with, or even just simply white supremacy. Any one of those things being the basis of all movies. And so, really quickly, then, since we know that to be the case, and we can see that in every movie we've ever watched, the next question is, should we, as believing Hebrews, watch movies? Should we partake in this part of the culture? And I think the answer is no. And what I wanted to get on here and talk about really quickly is that I don't do a whole bunch of movie watching, right? That's not how I really spend my time, is watching movies, right? That's not one of the ways that I spend my time. Now we do watch YouTube. We watch funny videos on YouTube, and we watch documentaries and all sorts of other stuff. But we don't do a whole bunch of movies. Now that's not to say that we don't ever watch movies. And when we do watch movies, we only watch them for educational purposes. Do you see what I'm saying? We don't watch them for entertainment. I'll tell you, I haven't been entertained by a movie even in a very, very, very long time. We don't just there's no Disney movies that we watch. There's no Marvel movies that we watch. Those wouldn't have any intrinsic value to us. But some movies we do believe will have some sort of understanding in them that may give us a clue as to some things that are going on, or some mysteries that are in place today that we have no concept of. I'll give you an example, and this is not to promote movies. I believe that us as Hebrews should abstain from a bunch of movie watching, right? I don't think that we should watch movies or anything for entertainment value. Like, we don't do sports. Every once in a while we'll do the highlights, from people that are come and gone, like Michael Vick or Reggie Bush, or people that are stars in their field. We'll do highlights, but we don't watch full football games. We know the football games themselves are rigged. We know that the outcome has been decided already. So why watch the game and follow the story when all you really want to watch are the cool plays? So that's what all we watch. And then we play football and basketball and do all these things ourselves, but we just don't get caught up in the storylines. Does that make sense? So one of the movies to kind of try to gain, shalom shalom, Mishpachah, somebody just joined in. I had to catch a phone call. But one of the movies that we watched, well, just to really quick go over what we just talked about, I do a bunch of movie watching. And I don't think Hebrews should do a bunch of movie watching unless it's for educational purposes. So I'll tell you some of the movies that we watched. We watched Judas and the Black Messiah, right? We watched that movie. And the reason why we watched it is because we're doing the American Jew series. And what's the guy's name? Well, Fred Hampton, but the other guy, the one that turned out to be the rat, the snitch. We know that his role has become maybe the major role in music today. That all of the people that are cooperating with the police and selling their brothers short, even though of course, these are criminal enterprises. But selling your brothers short, being in the criminal enterprise with them, but joining with the police and then setting your brother up. This is what Judas and the Black Messiah is all about. And so that is the American Jew struggle, right? That's Fred Hampton, that's Martin Luther King, that's Malcolm X, being secretly deceived by not only the United States government, but using your people to do it. You see what I'm saying? So we watched that one. And yes, there's some insight that you can gain by watching this movie. There's a quote in the movie that's very important for everybody to understand. The quote is, and it comes from J. Edgar Hoover, or the J. Edgar Hoover character, and I will be using this in an upcoming video. The quote goes that Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party are more dangerous than Russia, than China, than any nuclear power to the United States. This is the 60s, at the height of the Cold War, in the nuclear era, the nuclear war scare era. And you've got J. Edgar Hoover saying that Fred Hampton from the hood in Chicago is more dangerous than the nation of Russia and the nation of China. That's a powerful statement for you to understand as a Black American. Why is he so powerful? Why is he more powerful, this one man, than the entire nations of China and Russia, who the United States were supposedly at war with, in a Cold War, in a stalemate style war? Well, it's because they weren't at war with Russia or China. They're in cooperation with Russia and China. Russia and China are foils to America's Western capitalism. And America's Western capitalism is a foil to Russian, Chinese, Eastern communism. They use us as the bad guy and we use them as the bad guy for the purpose of controlling their people, right? America's the big bad guy in the West, Russia's the big bad guy in the East. So you use in cooperation one with another to scare your population into obedience, right? That's what the Cold War was. It was always the threat of Russian bombs. It's always the threat of Chinese takeover. They do that today, with other nations besides the Russians and the Chinese, and with them too. But somehow J. Edgar Hoover sees Fred Hampton as the greatest threat and to the national security, even greater threat than Russia or China. And that being said on film by white people is important to hear. And what you do is you snip that little piece out and you use it in context to recognize that Gideon, do you see what I'm saying, was the most vital threat to, was he against the Philistines? I can't remember who Gideon was fighting against, but he was the most vital threat to those people because he was the one that rescued them. Othniel, Ehud, all of the judges were the most powerful people in the world at the time because they were obedient to Yah and delivering their people from salvation. And Fred Hampton, believe it or not, you guys, is one of these messiahs, one of these judges that Elohim has risen up in the people to motivate and move the people in a certain direction. Do you see what I'm saying? And if you allow that to exist in society, then you will not have a society. We know that America was designed to capture, to indoctrinate, to re-educate, and then to ultimately destroy the Hebrew population, right? So you can't have a Fred Hampton out there existing in this way. And once you've neutralized him, 60 years ago, you can then tell the story of how you did it and go back and brag about it. But for people like me, I can look at that and glean information about what's going on today, right? About how this style of person, the person who is embedded within the organization that America wants to destroy, the snitch, the so-called rat, is how they manipulate the world today, how they manipulate the Black world today. When you have people like, all of these different people out here that have taken the stand, ratted on their criminal conspirators, ratted on them right next to him, we know that that is the style of COINTEL that they are doing right now, that they are promoting the person working with the police as the actual person to watch. It's become the popular thing to do. We see this in the media all the time. There's plenty of examples. And I don't have to go into black culture for you guys that follow black culture to know who I'm talking about. But just in case you don't, let's just run down the list. You've got, I guess the most recent one is some dude named Lil Woody who testified against his gang. There's another guy named FBG Butter who testified against his gang. They both got an immunity. And there's another guy named Gunner who also testified against his gang. All three of these people are YouTube stars now, right? Because of their involvement with the police, because of their cooperation with destroying these criminal enterprises. And that's not to say that the criminal enterprises themselves are not criminal enterprises and don't need to be destroying the community. But the promotion of the person who is selling the rest of his brothers and sisters out in order to make a quick buck, in order to make some fame, is who they were promoting in the movie Judas and the Black Messiah. And by doing that, they're also revealing the method to how they do it. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the reason why we watched that movie, to educate us on some of the tactics that they use in order to brainwash and manipulate our people. That's not something that I'm going to the movies to see. That's not something that I'm just, mark it on my watch list or anything like that. No, we just watch it because we need to. We needed to see exactly how the government did this thing. And you can watch a documentary, you can watch a movie. It's still for educational purposes. It's one of the movies that we watched. Another movie that we watched, right? And so these aren't movies that I just recommend you guys go out and watch. I'm going to do videos on them. I do videos myself. So this is how I tell the story, by understanding these different things in these movies. Another movie we watched was not American Gangster, but American Dream. I think it was called American Dream or Dream America. I put it in one of the videos in American Jew 3, but it was called like American Dream or something like that. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was starring Tom Cruise, right? Starring Tom Cruise as Barry Seal. If you guys know who Barry Seal is, he's the guy that was responsible for the cocaine surge in the 80s. He was the actual drug mule himself. He was a pilot, like an Air Force pilot, and the CIA and the DEA recruited him to fly CIA airplanes into Nicaragua and deliver guns to the Nicaraguan cartels to help fuel this war in Nicaragua. That was the excuse. The actual thing that he was doing was a top secret black operation to exchange those guns for drugs, to bring them into Arkansas, to distribute the drugs across the United States, to have material to make crack out of. Remember, this is a country who's designed to control its Hebrew population. American Made. The name of the movie is called American Made. It's about Barry Seal and this operation in the 80s that supplied the crack for the crack epidemic, or supplied the cocaine for the crack epidemic. You got one man that set this up, and he set it up with the help of George Bush and Ronald Reagan in the 80s. His name was Barry Seal. He went down to Nicaragua to drop guns off from the Arkansas National Guard Reserve. So they exchanged guns for drugs, supposedly to fight the cartels that were down there, or the Contra members. It was called Iran-Contra. It was a big scandal, set up by Oliver North and all of these different people who were really big in the government. They made a movie about that, right? They made a movie about it. They're not going to tell you why or what, or, what the real purposes was behind it, but they give you all the information about it. And because they give you all the information about it, you then can put two and two together to figure out that this man, Barry Seal, is the one who literally brought the cocaine in by the tons into Arkansas, where it was distributed from Mena, Arkansas, all over the country to every ghetto, in the entire country to fuel the crack epidemic. Do you see what I'm saying? That movie we watched. And we took snippets and pieces out of that movie and applied them to the concept of the concept we know is true of the CIA being responsible for the cocaine epidemic. Is right there. He tells you right in the trailer that he worked with CIA, the DEA, and then also Pablo Escobar. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is where the drugs came from, and you can prove that he was an operating CIA agent while he was doing these drug runs. The CIA knew about it and had stash places, setups for him all through the route to get there, including a whole Air Force, including a whole base of operations in Mena, Arkansas, with an airport, so that they can get tons and tons and all sorts of drugs into the country undetected. When they were finished with Barry Seal, they killed him execution style and dropped him off somewhere. By that time, they had already had the streets flooded. Do you see what I'm saying? That's why we watched that movie. And so these are educational, you know, pieces of information that you can use to ensure that you understand the situation. Not so that you can be entertained by the movie and you can get your bag of popcorn and sit up and watch Tom Cruise, because who wants to do that? No, I want to know what the situation is. I want to know what happened with Barry Seal, and they're not going to tell you the whole truth. So you get these bits of the truth, but you can use them in your display of what they've done, which is what I do. I make videos about it. So another movie that we watched this year that gave us a big piece of information that we just did not know, and a lot of historical importance to it, was the movie. It's an M. Night Shyamalan movie, and it's a scary movie. It's called The Other Way, The Other Side. It came out, The Others. It came out this year, and I hadn't seen it. But what's weird is that for the past 2 years, since we've been here in Africa, we've been watching these missing 411 cases on YouTube. Has anybody ever seen those missing 411 cases? Because they're good. They're a good watch on YouTube, because they're really strange stories about how people will go off into the woods and then disappear in strange, circumstances and scenarios. That children would disappear and reappear, or grown people would disappear and never be heard from again, or maybe their boots would be found or their clothes would be found folded up. And there's a bunch of different theories as to what was happening, but there were clusters of these disappearances around national parks. And people would say, oh, it's Bigfoot, but there would be no tracks. People would say, oh, okay, well, it's a wild man that lives in the woods. But again, that there would be no indication that this was the case. People would say, oh, it's a bear attack or cougar attacks. Again, no prints, no bears in the area. People would say, okay, well, there's cults operating. I think that that's one thing that is happening, that people are being abducted from parks because there are cults there. I think it's happening, but it's not every time, because there are scenarios where a kid or a person would only be missing or would only be away from the group for just like a split second, a few seconds, few moments, and then go missing and be never heard from again. So no cult could do that, right? And so a lot of people say it was the police. Well, I do think that's true too. Police are involved in these cults and they do abduct people. Unfortunately, it's just the way that it works in America. The abduction problem that we have in America is run through the police. That's why you have 100,000 missing people in America every year, is through the police department. And also the park police too, because I think the parks are involved as well. But again, that doesn't explain every case, right? And so we watched this movie, and the movie says that there are these things in the woods called fairies. And I thought to myself, okay, And so they show the fairies, and they're not these little tiny creatures with wings and, like Tinkerbell, right? They're these creatures. And the movie goes into a bunch of folklore about these creatures and that they would take children and that they were part physical and part spiritual, and that there are cultures all over the world that have known them, and they are called in other places demons. They're called in other places gnomes. They're called in other places like leprechauns. That these creatures that are half spiritual and half physical kidnap kids all the time, kidnap people, take you on these, mind trippy journeys. And this is what some of these people experience seeing: little men or strange scenarios. One scenario even said that there was voices that they heard out into the woods, that they thought somebody was out in the woods, and so they ran out into the woods to find somebody, and there was nobody out there, and they were caught in this and died. Do you see what I'm saying? The folklore says that these entities that are in these woods would be hostile to mankind. And literally in the park systems in America, you see these events that are like this, and no explanation as to why they're gone, people disappearing, no explanation as to what's going on. But the real deal is that the government does know, and that there are these preserves that are all over the United States that are closely maintained and monitored for this very reason, because they know this spiritual activity is there, that these creatures are in there, and they are containing them. Would you see what I'm saying? And studying them and monitoring them in real time with human victims that are coming in by the thousands every year, because they're set up like it's supposed to be a park, when what it actually is a zoo. Does that make sense? And like you are the zoo, because